Kia ora koutou katoa, can you hear me?
Yes, he loud it.
Great. So, ko manu toku ingoa. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. I apologize for not being on site, but I'm flying overseas on Tuesday. So going to Auckland and coming back was a bit tough time-wise. So as Liam was saying, today I'll be presenting the preliminary results of a study on face masks that I've been conducting in Northland. And I just completed it at the end of November, so it's pretty fresh. And from the Northland data, sort of extrapolated what the issue with face masks could be in New Zealand, including how many microplastics and nanoplastics we might be releasing in the environment. So that ties in very nicely with what Elena just talked about. And the big question will be how many of these microplastics and nanoplastics might be ended up in our soil, for example, from those face masks. Sorry, I'm moving up here. So just a bit of introduction on the project that I've been leading since 2019 that I co-initiated with Nick Bamford from the Northland Regional Council called Tai Tokerau Debris Monitoring Project. So it's basically a citizen science-based project. Anyone is welcome in Northland to take part into it. The main aims are to address marine debris and litter issues in Northland and try to bridge our knowledge gap. So this is done by providing a platform for anyone to record their results on their litter cleanup. So it can be as simple as just telling us the main categories, like what's the percentage of plastics, glass, or metal that they recorded, all the way to using the marine debris tracker app and actually taking a GPS position of every single litter item and also having effort. So it's very more interesting from my point of view. So then I can do GIS analysis as well. The good thing as well is there's no commitment required. So you can do it once, you can do it as many times as you want. So yeah, we're trying to also help with the data being nicely conducted by Sustainable Coastline. They're doing great work here in Northland as well. And on top of that, over the last few years, I've had a few pet peeves that I've been looking at in particular. So I started with plastic fireworks. I actually presented the preliminary results at the 7th International Marine Debris Conference in South Korea in September. Parking tickets, I've started doing that since 2020. We actually just finished it and I've collected over 2,000 parking tickets since June 2021 during systematic surveys. And the latest one that I'm going to talk to you about today is the face masks, which I'm sure you've seen everywhere near you. So just a little bit of a reminder, in New Zealand, we got mandated to wear face masks, anyone 12 years and above, as of the 18th of August 2021. And it's quite interesting to see that not all the posters provided by the environment included a message about, the correct disposal of face masks. So I wish that they had a bit of a better message about discarding the messages and being kaitiaki. So hopefully that's what's going to happen next time we're mandated to wear face masks. Also, just a bit of a timeline to show where we got mandated to wear the face mask during the whole COVID pandemic. And also to highlight that Northland, we're not as unlucky as Aucklanders, but we did spend a bit more time in the red light system as well. So as I was connecting my parking ticket surveys, even prior to August 18, 2021, I didn't really notice that many face masks. I mean, I did spot one every now and then, but nothing like major to sort of attract my attention. But after the second lockdown, so we got kind of back out in September, then I started to really see, quite a large increase in the face masks, especially in car parks where I've been doing my surveys for parking tickets. So that kind of got me interested to actually record the data and see whether we're going to see an actual increase and where we do find them. So what I've done is I use Esri Survey 123 app quite like that particular app because you can pretty much design it the way you want and ask specific questions. The survey can be accessed to the public, so you just have to share a QR code so they can do it for free. It's also usable offline, so you don't have to use your data all the time, which is quite handy. And the way we set it up is that it can be done randomly by the public or systematically by myself, because I'm interested in having effort and really sort of looking at the density of face masks around Whangārei. And the random data was used mainly to show like the spread of the issue within Northland, like where in Northland did you find these face masks? And then from the systematic surveys, then I standardized the data in terms of items per meter square to assess trends over time, and hopefully next year doing some GIS analysis and look for hotspots. So just to give you an idea, for the survey, we collected data on the date, the actual GPS location, the region. We also had people collecting some data, let's say Wellington, Dunedin as one, which was kind of cool. We also take data on the number of face masks found at that particular spot and the type of face mask. So we had the surgical face mask, the KN95, the cloth ones, and all the different ones you can find. Then I was also interested in where the face masks were found, like on the gutter, on the roadside, in the car park, in the water, on the beach, anything like that. Also, we started to look at the number of strings broken. One of the main reasons behind this one is trying to assess whether the majority of the face masks will be discarded because they were broken and therefore not usable. And then what we do as well is once we submit the data and including a photo, so the photo is quite good for me, so then I can double check that the data that was submitted by the public is actually correct. And then what we do is, thanks to the Esri and the dashboard, I don't know if you ever used this app, it's actually quite cool as well. So the data is shared by the public in real time. So this is the area in Whangārei that I covered every single month to look for both parking tickets and face masks. I divided into 3 zones just for convenience because it takes 2 or 3 days to cover all that area. So it was easier to say, okay, today I'm going to do zone 1 and then zone 2 and then zone 3. The ones in yellow are actually 3 car parks that I've done actually every single week. And the reason I've chosen that particular area of Whangārei is that regardless of the level of lockdown, I could still go to the supermarket shopping and do my sort of exercise and still be able to collect the data without going too far away and sort of break the rule. So overall, it's about 265,000 meters squared that I've surveyed every single month. It does change a little bit because sometimes the part of the car park or area is kind of fenced off for road work. So I took that into account as well when I did my standardization of the data. What I've done as well is I was interested in looking at the compliance level. So a few times in March, kind of like when in the supermarket, I probably was the weird one looking with my notepad and kind of counting who's wearing what and what type of face mask. So I did that in different supermarkets and shops. And I also did that outdoors in the city center to sort of see how many people did wear face masks and which one they did so. And every single time I tried to get at least 100 people or more in my sample size. So then what I was trying to do as well is from the data is to try to estimate how many face masks were actually used in Northland and eventually in New Zealand. So to do that, I used, apologies for the pronunciation of the name, but Zejigbu and Chang 2020 paper that calculated the daily face mask generation. So it's kind of like a simple-ish equation. So what you have to do is take the population number. So for me, I used the ones above 12 years old from the Stats New Zealand. Then I looked at the population that are using the face masks. So I used both urban and the whole population of New Zealand. So in the paper, they used the urban one, but I also used the whole population because in New Zealand, it was not just the urban population. It was basically anyone above 12 years old was mandated to use the face masks. Then you multiply that by the surgical face mask used. So I used the data from my project for that particular number. Then multiply that by the acceptance rate of the people, so the percentage of people actually wearing that type of face masks. And then you multiply that by how many face masks you think are being used per person per day. And then I was interested in the year data, so I just multiplied the whole number by 365 to get the yearly estimate. Then I found another interesting paper by Torres and De La Torre in 2021, and they had 4 scenarios for the estimate of daily use of the face mask. So you go from 1 mask per day per person to actually reusing your face mask up to 20 times. And from my personal observation, I know many people use it many times, end up in your pocket, or you hang it in your car, and then when you need it, you pick it up. So it was kind of nice to sort of use different scenarios to sort of give us a bit of a range of what was going on. Then I was interested in figuring out how many microplastics and nanoplastics all these face masks might be releasing into the environment. So for that, I based the equation, or I used the equation from Ma et al. From 2021. So for microplastics, they use the daily face mask generation, or here are my yearly estimates. Then you multiply it by the percentage of mismanaged waste in New Zealand. So it's about 2% from another paper. Then you multiply it again by the estimated daily face mask use per capita. So again, we did the 1 to 20 times per face mask. And then you multiply that by the mean of microplastics that are estimated per face mask. So microplastics in the paper is anything equal to or above 1 micrometer. And then you do exactly the same thing for nanoplastics, so anything below 1 micrometer. And then from my own estimates of the surgical face mask, I weighed about 15 different ones, and the average of a face mask is about 3.35 gram, at least in New Zealand. So in terms of results, like I was saying, when anyone providing the data, it gets straight away into the dashboard. So it's pretty much what it looks like. I don't have a direct link to the website, but it's interactive. So that means that as soon as you zoom in, the number of face masks and location and the type of face masks will automatically change. So just to give you an idea, just in Northland, we collected and recorded data on over 5,000 face masks, with 93% of them being surgical face masks. And the majority of them were found in the gutter or down the drain, which is where we found them most commonly, followed by car parks. So just to give you a bit of an illustration of where we found them. So actually down the drain, I couldn't get those out. Sometimes in supermarket shopping carts or trolley, right by the loop, so pretty close to the water. All you need is a bit of wind and that will end up in the water. Some were in interesting places, like shoved down into those sort of metal parts that in pavement. So that kind of shows you that they were not dropped by accident. Someone really shoved it down there. Or in the tree branches as well. That was quite interesting. And really sadly, we did find a few face masks right up to Cape Reinga, so right at the top of Northland. So from the map earlier, you can show that it's pretty much everywhere we had face masks, even in the countryside or even by the car park by Tane Mahuta, which is in the beautiful Waipua forest. So it's pretty sad. So from the systematic survey that I conducted for over 15 months, this is what we found. So I collected about 1,445 face masks during that time. 91.1% were the single-use plastics, surgical face masks, so quite close to the whole of Northland, which was 93%. And as you can see, there was a steady rise in the number of face masks that we found per meter square, even under the orange traffic lights. And I guess my guess is that quite often there was still, COVID cases going up. We still been mandated to wear them in stores, even though not outdoors, so people were still wearing them. But interestingly, after the mandate, we see this really large drop in the number of face masks, up to 83% after a couple of months. So the drop of the mandate is making a massive influence on the amount of face masks that we're finding in the environment. And just for interest, on that pile of face masks, that was pretty much one rubbish bag. It was about 1,000 face masks in that bag around that I put in the lab. So when I calculated the annual face mask used in Northland for anyone above 12 years old, so I used the Stats New Zealand data. So about 1,070,000 people live in Northland, 76% live in cities. From my own data, 98% of people complied with the face mask, which is actually quite good. And surgical face masks were used by 60.8% of the population. So as you can see, there's a big drop from the number of or percentage of face masks we find in the environment, from 90% down to 68%. So using the equation, I looked at the urban population, so it's in the light blue, and then the whole population, which is the whole histogram bar, and then I looked at the annual number of face masks if you use it 20 times and down to just once per day. So in Northland, over a year, we probably used as low as 1.6 million face masks or as high as 41 million, which is quite a lot if you think about it. Doing the same thing for New Zealand, then we get as little as likely 40 million face masks used like 20 times per day for the urban population only, to as much as 1.1 billion face masks in one single year. Then I tried to compare my estimates with what another group of scientists used for data overseas by Whangārei et al. In 2020. So in the estimates, they looked at the whole population, and the compliance level was much lower than ours, like down to 70%. They also had a much higher use of face masks, singular face masks than us. A lot of people use cloth face masks, for example, in New Zealand, so that's probably why it's much lower. And I did only for one face mask per day to sort of do it similar to them. So the estimate was 887 million face masks in a year in New Zealand, and with my estimates, it's about 1 billion, so it's still pretty high. Like halfway will be like 900 million face masks in a year in New Zealand. So what they've done as well is from those numbers, then they looked at the 2% waste mismanagement. So that ends up being 17 million face masks likely discarded in the environment in New Zealand. And from my estimates, using my numbers, it was 21 million. So it's pretty close. So let's say roughly 20 million face masks in a year likely got into the New Zealand environment. So then what I tried to do is estimate these microplastics and nanoplastics in Northland and in New Zealand from these 2% discarded. And same thing under the various scenarios. So from 1 mask used per day per person to 20 times per person. So you end up with as low as 56 million microplastics to as much as 1.5 billion in Northland. And for the nanoplastics, it's as low as 70 quadrillion. So that's quite a lot of zeros. And all the way up to 1.9 quintillion. I never heard about that number before, 10 to the power 15. I had to actually look it up. It was so massive. I was like, wow, that's incredible. So for New Zealand, same thing. Microplastics likely in the environment from this discarded surgical face masks. We look at between 1.4 billion to 37.7 billion microplastics. And for nanoplastics, it's 1.8 quintillion to 47.6 quintillion. So just following from Helena's talk and how much of these might be end up in the soil as well, it's actually quite, like I was saying, really mind-blowing, those numbers. So in conclusion, we can see that New Zealand is not immune to face masks pollution like the rest of the world. We discarded quite a lot of face masks, and that's likely to lead to a big problem and add up to this plastic pollution issue that we have, especially with the number of microplastics and nanoplastics. So one of these overseas papers saying we're looking at a ticking time bomb on the global scale. So just looking at the number of microplastics and nanoplastics released in New Zealand from face masks, when you sort of try to get your mind around the whole world, I don't want to think about how many zeros that is, but I do agree that we are sitting on a ticking time bomb for sure. So in terms of recommendation, as we all know, microplastics are everywhere. So my strong belief is that face masks are making it worse. It's definitely not helping. We know that from Rufino as well, earlier talk, that microplastics are even in the fish that we eat. Some of my colleagues earlier this year published a paper showing that microplastics are found in common dolphins found here in New Zealand by Massey University staff and students. And Auckland University also found microplastics in the baleen whale that are found in Auckland waters, so just outside from where you are, guys. Spinnerman in 2022 released a really interesting paper and it showed that the discarded face masks are UV decayed, so they primarily decay through photooxidation from the exposure to UV light. And the longer they're exposed to UV light, the faster they will shed microplastic and nanoplastics. So that means that we obviously need to remove these face masks from the environment as soon as possible. So what we like to recommend is, one, creating dedicated collection points. Should we be mandated to wear face masks again, like for example, similar to the soft plastic, where you can go to the supermarket and drop your face masks. Or if you are a company above, let's say a certain number, like say 20 or 50 staff member, then you should also have like dedicated bins for face masks to be collected. Then we also recommend that those face masks, as much as possible, should be recycled. Like for example, future posts can turn them into plastic fence posts, which might be better than sending them to the landfill, because if they're in the landfill, they're probably going to go into the leachate eventually, which then it's going to go into the waste treatment plant. And like Helena was saying, you still get those microplastics and nanoplastics from wastewater. What we like to do as well is see an improvement in the education message about the proper disposal of face masks, including on TV or any sort of message that the government plan on doing for the next mandate, should one happen. And we also recommend that proper disposal of face masks, including as much as possible trying to divert them from landfill, should be part of the next response plan from the government for any new pandemic. So I quite like this sort of cartoon. We not only need to protect a life, but is it worse and at what costs, especially for all these animals and plants or the soil in New Zealand. From my own experience, knowing that people wear face masks many times, put them into their pocket or in their bag, or even pick them up when they're dropping on the floor or put them in their car. My question, and I don't know the answer, is are they still being effective protecting us from these respiratory viruses? And if they're not, is that a price that we willing to pay in terms of plastic pollution? Like, is it really worth it? Like, I don't know, but I just like to put the question up there. So thank you very much. And obviously I'd like to really say a big thank you to all the citizen scientists that have been helping collecting the data in Northland. So like probably a couple of 2,000. So we know how much the problem was in our region. So I can only imagine what it was like in the region where you live. But thank you so much for your attention.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Manu. Again, questions, if it's simple, I can relay it. Otherwise, please come up.
Sure.
The question was, how did you dispose of the face masks that you collected in the study?
Yeah, that was a big thing of me. I learned about the future post way too late. So unfortunately, they went to the landfill. But if I do it again, I'll definitely make sure that I send them to future post.
I have a question, Manu, in the recommendations at the end, you talked about ways to collect and recycle the masks, but do you think there's, you know, if we are mandated to wear masks again, do you think there's a role for encouraging reusables or even, you know, some investment in reusable face masks that are effective at, you know, preventing the spread of the viruses?
Definitely. Like I know in some places they use biodegradable face masks. I can't remember from which material they were made, but they were like plant-based or something like this. I guess the question is, would the government recommend them in terms of the efficiency, and to what would be the cost? Because if they're quite expensive, not everyone will be able to afford them. But yeah, if there was a possibility to use more like a biodegradable ones, then yeah, definitely. And then I guess it's a person preference whether you wear a cloth one or a surgical one or N95 in terms of which one do you think it's working or being efficient. But if we're using the single-use ones, then yeah, if they can be made from biodegradable material, then it will be better, that's for sure. So that will be reducing the amount of microplastic and nanoplastics in the environment.
Questions?
Thank you for your research. I have a question just to go back, sort of reinforcing Liam's question. So rather than the biodegradables, the reusables, if there's some, in the early stages of the mask mandate, when the government mandated not only that you had to wear masks, but they had to be disposable if you were working in a hospitality context, whether at that time we were doing some research into reuse systems for masks, and there was a little bit of research from Europe around companies that were setting up reusable masks and collection and washing systems that could be used, for example, in the workplace settings that you've described, where you can have a collection bin. Did you come across any similar research? Like, you've obviously talked about the future post, but have you come across any other research or examples of reuse schemes that could be recommended in the future if mask mandates come up again?
That's a good question. I've been doing this on my spare time, so there's so much time I can spend on it. So especially like looking for other research, I was mainly focusing on getting the data first. But I've heard from one paper, I think it was based in Papua New Guinea, on one of these countries where obviously people cannot afford to buy too many face masks. So the person was saying that you can wash even a single-use face mask, surgical face mask, up to 20 times and it's still working with a bit of hot water and soap or something like this. But if anyone knows about any initiatives that you know of that could reduce, you know, how much we discard of face masks, especially if they're made of plastics, or any other initiatives, then I'm really keen to hear about it, because I'm planning to sort of write my results and share that with the government. I did that about 6 months ago, but nothing really came up out of that. I emailed every single politicians from the leading parties. Hardly anyone responded. So I'm hoping that now they have a whole year of data plus the big difference after the mandate. I'm hoping that they would listen this time and try to come up with solutions. So I'm mainly from a scientist, so my main interest is sort of getting the data first and then sort of passing on the baton to someone to sort of find solutions. Because like I said, I'm pretty limited in how much time I can spend on this, just like my free time. But if anyone in the assistants know of any studies that they heard or any initiative, I'm really keen to hear about it, that's for sure.
Good. Yeah, the question is the 93%, I think it was, of the masks you found were surgical masks. But what was the breakdown of the remaining 7% or whatever it was?
The next one were the K95, so maybe another 3-4%, and then cloth ones that were another like 3-ish%. And then after that was like dust masks. I didn't find too many of those, but it was definitely the surgical, then the KN95 or FFFPs. They're pretty similar, and then the cloth ones, which is interesting again because a larger population were using cloth face masks, but they not sort of in the environment as much, because I guess even me, when I drop it, I just pick it up and then I wash it again. So I'm not going to be too scared of reusing it and washing it.